When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back to the Black Table here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Greg Carr, and every week we explore a topic devoted to the liberation not only of African people, but of humanity, and for those who are committed to building a better world. Well, it's back to school time. A lot of students around the world have gone back to school, and here in the United States, that is no less true, both pre-kindergarten through high school and the universities, colleges and universities. And in this season, there are a lot of back to school specials and back to school shows and back to school conversations. And we thought here at the Black Table that we would contribute to the dialogue, but we would do it through a Black Table lens. And today we have two of the best teachers in the world. They have a very accomplished set of works that they've done, and they have worked and taught in just about every kind of experience and valence that you can imagine. And they've done it as women of African descent, as Black women. So, we regularly have our HBCU educators roundtable, and one of our guests is a regular in that rotation. Of course, that is Professor Catherine Adams at Claflin University. Kathy Adams joins us, and she has taught at a number of institutions of different types: University of the West Indies, Allen University, Payne College. She's taught at Eastern Carolina University. She got her PhD at the University of Massachusetts and her master's degree in African American Studies from Temple University, a native Philadelphian she is. And she is one of the few people to have matriculated in both those programs in Africana Studies, in fact. But she's a proud graduate of Johnson C. Smith University. And I could say a whole lot more about her. She's also taught K-12. Washington Rhodes in middle school in Philadelphia. She's worked with Philadelphia Freedom Schools, and she is currently working, in fact, with children there in South Carolina. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. And we have, for the first time, and not the last time at the Black Table, another master teacher who has worked at HBCUs, who has worked in just about every kind of formation you can imagine in terms of education. And she is Kimberly Worthy is currently teaching at the Bullis School here in the the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And she has worked at just about every type of formation you can imagine. African-centered schools like Roots Public Charter School. She's worked at Friendship Woodbridge International School, an IB school, and the charter school movement. She's worked at Howard University, both in the Office of Undergraduate Studies, working with undergraduates, and at the Howard University School of Math and Science, the middle school of Math and Science. And in 2009, the District of Columbia recognized her as the DC Teacher of the Year. So if you look around out there, you'll see her down at the White House, hanging out with the Obamas, among other folks. She has taught on other continents. She's talked to students from Howard during a study abroad we had in South Africa when she was over there. She's been affiliated with UNICEF, the Oprah Winfrey Academy. She's worked with the Smithsonian. And she did some work this summer, in fact, back on the campus of Howard University with the Verizon initiative that she's been working with. But I could go on and on about these sisters, but without further ado, please welcome our Master Teachers Roundtable edition, our Back to School edition, Kathy Adams and Kim Worthy. How y'all doing?
All right.
Hey, what's going on? I wanted to give the folk a little taste anyway of who you all are. I'm just so excited to have you both at the same time in the same place, because the last time, y'all, we tried to do this, Ms. Worthy was already in school. And any of you who are teachers, K-12, you know that once the school day starts, it doesn't end. So we're just glad to have you back here, in the first place. I wanted to start this first block with something personal. Folks heard a little bit about you, but for both of you, particularly as we're talking about teacher shortages now and people leaving the teaching profession, certainly in the wake of what happened in the last 2 years with COVID, what brought the two of you, who certainly could be doing anything else in the world, to the work that you love more than anything else in terms of profession? What made you all teachers? Maybe we'll start, Kathy, maybe we'll start with Kim, since she's joining us for the first, but not the last time.
Well, definitely a personal journey. And it started on Spelman's campus, I took a course called African Psychology with Dr. Timothy Moore. Actually, it was at Morehouse when I attended Spelman. And
so people don't know, you can take classes in any of the AUC.
Yes.
Okay. That's important to know, though.
It's important to know, because everybody's like, I don't want to go to Spelman's all girls. No, we take classes at Clark. Back then, we took classes at Morris Brown and of course, over at Morehouse. And so I took this course, African Psychology, and we had to read an article called The Cultural Reference for Teaching Black Children by Dr. Edwin Nichols, an organizational psychologist.
The legendary Ed Nichols, no question.
Edwin Nichols. And so we're reading it in class, and we're reading about African axiologies and African logic systems and African epistemological styles and learning styles. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking around the class, and I'm like, wait a minute. For everything that he described in this article, I had a practical example from how I was taught at Roots, an African Center school here in DC, before the charter school, the private school, Roots Activity Learning Center, started by Mama Bernita Amerson, Dr. Mama Bernita Amerson. And I said, wait, and she started in 1977. I was in her first class, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is how we were taught.
So you actually went to an African Center?
I went to African, I was in her first class, and wow. So people were reading about it, in the class, but I was like, and I'm screaming, I said, wait a minute, I was taught this way. So I had practical examples, and I'm telling them in the class, this is how we were taught. And so I'm screaming out, and I'm like, wait a minute. And so that was in the fall. And in the spring, I took a class called Advocacy for Urban Schools. My major was political science. So I didn't take any education courses. But then I took this course called Advocacy for Urban Schools. And we had to read Dream Keepers by
Gloria Lansing Billings. Yeah.
Gloria Lansing Billings. So I had to write a paper, and I used everything from this article from Edwin Nichols and Dream Keepers, and I got an A++ on. This is above and beyond work, and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I'm supposed to be. This is me. It's all coming together here, and I didn't read the description of this class. I just needed these hours to get out of school. And it sounded cool, like, advocacy work. I love Black children. I love, And he passes out this clipboard and says, okay, now you all have to sign up for your student teaching. And I said, wait a minute. I'm not an education major. I've never taken an education course. I can't do student teaching. I can't do this. And he said, well, then you need to drop the course. I said, no. I need these hours. He said, well, you either do this or you drop the course. So I had to do it. And it just fit me like a glove. And I did AP US History at Southside High School in Atlanta, Georgia. It's no longer there. And I mean, it was like I've been teaching all my life. And again, I just used everything from Dr. Nichols' book, Dr. Lansing Billings' book, everything I experienced at Roots, and put it into my lesson plans, and it just worked.
You know what? Maybe we should.
Oh, this is it. I'm going to go teach.
We should, y'all listening now. I mean, the power of community. You came out of a community, obviously, with a number of African-centered schools and just a politically engaged, culturally rooted kind of community here in DC. And everything just manifested. And we just heard, by the way, you hear the quality and necessity of HBCUs, particularly in terms of that learning space. We just got a master lesson, even in that, in a snippet. We're gonna maybe, Kat, if you could talk a little bit, Dr. Adams, about maybe the same kind of formative experiences for you. I know you went to Johnson C. Smith as Ms. Worthy went to Spelman. Was it something similar for you, or was it a little bit different? Maybe just a couple of minutes, and we'll come back on the other end of the break and continue the conversation.
Yeah, actually, for me, it was the exact opposite. I am the children of 2 middle school teachers. And every time somebody said, "Are you going to be a teacher when you grow up?" No. What's the opposite? I'm going to be a firefighter. And so when I got to Johnson C. Smith, my great aunt had attended there. And she was in the first class that admitted women onto campus. And so I'm like, I want to, I'm a business major, I want to own Beatrice. And my mother said, well, you should take some education courses while you're there because you never know. And I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. And, I switched over from business to being an English major because I love the faculty in English. I loved reading. Someone had advised that if I wanted to go into business, that I needed to be excellent in terms of writing and reading skills. And I found a home in English. But when I went off to graduate school to Temple University, there was a teacher shortage and they were offering emergency certifications. So I went in, I took the test, and I thought, I had taken some Spanish. So I started in some bilingual elementary schools, just subbing. And it just turned out that at Rhodes, as you mentioned, they had a long-term teaching position. And the next thing I knew, I was teaching 7th grade geometry. And then the next year, 8th grade social studies. And it's also the place where my mother taught. So everybody in the building knew me. They remembered me coming into that school. And so there's just this kind of legacy of people who just wrapped their arms around me. And what I did was I was taking classes at Temple in the evening, and I would kind of reshape those lessons and bring them into the classroom by day.
Wow. Well, we're going to come back in a moment and continue this conversation, but I would be remiss if I didn't take 15 seconds, Dr. Adams, to have you mention the name of the Teachers College where your pops and went to school, because a lot of these HBCUs were Teachers College. So if you don't mind sharing with the folks who trained those master teachers in Philadelphia for decades, if you
Cheney State Teachers College. Yes. Yes, that's where my parents met.
No question. Which of course gives us, Ms. Worthy, a chance to shout out Miners Teacher College in DC that did the same thing for the master teachers in Columbia. So we'll come back in a moment with Kim Worthy and Kathy Adams here at the Black Table, continuing this back to school edition with our Master Teachers Roundtable. Back in a moment.
Can you believe the nerve of these Republicans? They only want to block progress for our community. They talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. They played politics with veterans' health care. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and funding for our HBCUs, and against lowering prescription drug costs for our seniors. These Republicans keep trying hard to stand in the way, but President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats won't let them. They are delivering for us. The Democratic National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back to the Black Table here at the Black Star Network. It's our back to school edition as we talk with Kim Worthy and Catherine Adams about the process of education. 2 master teachers who have given us a taste of how they came into the profession, very organically, community-based, Black institutions, really powerful. When we left, Kathy, as Kim was talking about her journey and her undergraduate journey, you had gotten us to Johnson C. Smith, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your experience with community. And not only that, the acquiring of content mastery. Both of you have deep grounding in content. As you say, you went to school for English, and Ms. Worthy, you went to school for political science and then transferred over to education. So many of our teachers, particularly our young teachers now, are coming into the classroom. And I'm wondering if either you have any thoughts about content, about what teachers should have, what you've acquired along the way, and what you think folks coming into the profession should have as they think about teaching.
I think content is very important. So I came in, obviously, political science, but I let my interviewers know in my interview, I want to teach Black children our history. And they said, okay, great. We're going to hire you for math and science.
Hey, Kat, you ended up in math and science too, huh?
And I was like, okay, I didn't have a job, so I went that weekend and bought all these math and science books. And then the first day the teachers were back, the principal came up to me, Mrs. Hurdle, and she said, Ms. Worthy, I loved what you said about teaching Black children our history. How do you feel about teaching all of the sixth graders, their history? And I said, what? Yes. And she said, I will give you all the resources you need, and I'll name the class something else so district office doesn't know. This is in Brooklyn, New York, wow. MS 61. Wow. And I said, oh my God, yes. And you know what she bought me? Malefe Asante's Classical Africa book, the workbooks, and then his African American history books. And I said, okay, thank you. And so that was it. I had all the sixth graders, and I knew that history. And so I was successful. So what I used was the axiology. Our number one value is relationships. So they had to call me Mama Kim.
And for those who don't know, work at Ed Nichols or in African psychology, axiology is what? The study of values.
Values. And our number one value is relationships. They had my number. This is in 2000. They had my number. Wow. And they were like, we have your number? And I said, yes. If you have a problem with the homework, call me. And never to this day, 22 years of my founders, no one has ever prank called me or anything. They call me if they have a problem with the homework. Period. But it builds that trust. So on the first day, relationship, period. Mm-hmm. And so the axiology right there. I celebrated their birthdays every month. I made cupcakes for every child every month. Why? Because Mama Bernita did that for us. She didn't make cupcakes for us. She bought, she hired a caterer to bring in the cakes for us. I ain't had that type of money.
Yeah, that kind of money in Brooklyn, New York as a kid, huh?
Cupcakes. And every month we celebrate the birthdays. And so went to their birthday parties at Empire Boulevard, and everything Mama Bernita did, I did, to the point down to singing We Are the Roots song every morning. Everything she did, I did. And I told her all of this. She was like, keep going. You got it. And it worked like mad. So I didn't need classroom management because of the relationships. And the content, they just loved it. They trusted me, and they loved it because I was speaking to their subconscious memories. I was just like opening it up. Like their ancestors were like, yeah, come on, let us out. Let us out. Wow. So but the content is very important. You can't go in there not knowing your content.
This is remarkable. Kathy, as Kim is talking, the question of trust, the question of relationships, the issue of community, the issue of having jegnas. Some people might call them mentors. We don't use the Greek word. We take it from the Amharic, as Asa Hilliard taught us. Jegnas, these fearless elders who will come in and stand in the gap, as we heard there. So administration wants one thing, the district needs math teachers, but I'm going to put you in a position to help our children, and I'll stand between you and any process of intervention. Any of those things resonate with you, Kathy? You talked about roads. Talk a little bit about your experiences with that.
All of those things, in various ways. The first, most important Jegna I think that I had was my math teacher from 7th and 8th grade, Alice Jordan. And so the honor of being able to have my students do a geometry bingo, and Alice Jordan had come down from the district to see what we were doing. So I definitely recognize that. And then, of course, being at Temple and Sonia Sanchez, taking classes with her and really just kind of sitting at her feet, I am constantly drawing on things that she showed and taught us about pedagogy in those classrooms, and just translates into everything that I've done since then. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that some of those lessons that I got from Sonia Sanchez almost directly linked me to Michael Thelwell at UMass Amherst. Just like a similar style, just the care that they both had for students, the way in which they would be so interested in everything that those students wrote. I saw it I think Michael Thelwell, he'd have these large seminars for his a history of the civil rights class. So it'd be capped at 120, 120 students. And sometimes he'd have 3 graduate students, and sometimes it'd just be him and I. And he would always say, let's divide the papers equally. And he said, I don't want to rush you, but when you're done, can you drop off the papers that you've read at my office? Because I want to make sure that I get a chance to read them before they go back in the students' hands. And so,
which is important for those of you going into teaching, what you just mentioned. You actually were a teaching assistant at the undergraduate level with Mike Thelwell, of course, but you actually did the work. So teachers shouldn't, if you have a chance, young people, please apprentice with somebody who's a master teacher.
Yeah, I think that it just was invaluable, better than any pedagogy seminar or class that I had taken. It was sitting with those people who cared deeply for students, and really just kind of, just gave me the permission to kind of close my door, just like I did yesterday. I said, okay, let's close the door and have this conversation so that we could, as my sister said, like build relationships, that the administration is saying one thing, but each semester I closed that door. And yesterday I said, okay, now let's come up with I call them rules for the road, and taken from, Baba Derek Jackson here in Columbia, South Carolina. And we come up with, it's like, here's the syllabus, and now here are the rules for us, by us.
Ooh, can you all talk about that a little bit? I've seen you do that, Miss Worthy. I'm at middle school math and science over at Howard campus. This, the teacher ed folks call it a student contract, but that rules of the road is a little different. How important is it to involve the young people in the classroom in their learning by trying to set some kind of consensus on how we're going to go about that? Might that address some of the quote unquote behavior problems people say these young people present?
Yes, absolutely. So it's always important to have buy-in, right, from your students, and break down this hierarchy between, that's created, like the teacher is up here and you're down here, versus, let's have a community, a community of trust, a community of accountability, and that allows even myself to be held accountable. And a lot of adults don't even want to entertain that. But my students know hey, I too need to be held accountable sometimes. If I say I'm going to get your homework back to you, in a timely manner, and I don't, hold me to that.
Mm-hmm.
You all deserve to have your stuff back, if you need to study for a test. And that takes a lot of humility. But if we're going to have trust, everybody needs to buy in. Everybody needs to weigh in. Everybody needs to be a part of this community together. And so the egos need to be out the door. And so, obviously, yeah, that's it. That's all I would say.
But it's interesting in terms of accountability. I think about another master teacher, Jamila Anderson, who's done so much work in Philadelphia. She does what you did, which is, give the students your telephone number, and she makes sure the parents have it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm wondering for both of you, in terms of accountability, how I'm sure teachers or prospective teachers are watching this and saying, I don't know if I want that much access to me. And I'm sure there are a lot of parents out there saying, I wish I had the phone number of. Now, how do you not get burned out with that? I mean, is there a way to balance that? Because I know you do the same thing. You're always talking to parents. You're always talking to community folk. But how does that level of accessibility, how do people who would be nervous say something maybe to reassure young teachers that might not be a bad thing? You won't get burned out necessarily. Or do you just have to have a passion for teaching when you come in there?
Well, I know my students, because they're college students, I think that the building of community is so important. But I often say to them, we have to be connected to each other. And there are a variety of ways in which we all have to be committed to everybody's success, right? And so that means that you take copious notes, not just for yourself, but for your classmate that may miss a class. And if they ask you, what did we talk about in class? Then you want to be able to be a good classmate and share those notes. I do make myself available to students, but I also tell them, that this is not just an exchange between, me and individual students, that we, we talk about like a buddy system. So there should be at least 2 other people in this room that you look around and see when you come into the classroom. If you don't see that person, then then you should let that person know, like, we missed you in class, right? And so I find that to this sister Kim Worthy's point, I don't have people who are coming or abusing that kind of access. I have people who genuinely are coming with a question, and then sometimes I'll say, all right, and now you've been baptized to spread that word to anyone else.
That's what I say.
And so,
Put it in the group chat.
Exactly. And so yesterday, I could just tell that already that spirit of community is really starting to develop among first year students in one of my gen ed classes. For some reason, I couldn't log on, in the classroom. And so I said, well, we may have to have a student try it to see if that'll work. And the student jumped up. She said, I'll help you teach today. And I said, oh, this is wonderful. So she came up and she logged in. And then we just co-taught. I walked her through some things. I said, let's get the people from Zoom in through, I'll give you co-host rights. And so both of us were standing up there guiding everyone through the work that we did yesterday. Definitely. And for that to happen so early is something that just really excited me about this school year in particular.
Right. Well, when we come back, thank you, Kathy. When we come back, Kim, please jump in, because I know you had some thoughts on this as well. And for folks who are listening, thinking about what teachers face, there are many teachers out here who have tech challenges because they don't have the support, don't have the equipment. We do have each other, though. And we're getting some insight into that right now. We'll be back in a moment here at the Black Table, our Back to School edition with our Master Teachers Roundtable. Back in a moment.
invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Can you believe the nerve of these Republicans? They only want to block progress for our community. They talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. They played politics with veterans' health care. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and funding for our HBCUs, and against lowering prescription drug costs for our seniors. These Republicans keep trying hard to stand in the way, but President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats won't let them. They are delivering for us. The Democratic National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back to the Black Table here on the Black Star Network. I'm Greg Carr, your host, joined by Catherine Adams and Kim Worthy at our Master Teachers Roundtable, our Back to School edition. And when we left, we were talking about building that trust, building that community, having that accountability, and how co-learning with students and having that community expand through that trust really makes a difference. Ms. Worthy, I know you had some thoughts about this as well.
In terms of burnout, is that what you?
Well, I mean, just listening to you all talk about this, we certainly see reports of this mass exodus from teaching,
right,
already having these shortages. And there are a lot of teachers who get burnt out. I can't imagine that either of you haven't had those moments. I mean, I know I have a glimpse for all the years that I've known both of you, how hard you work. And it seems like your clock is 24 hours. How do you prevent burnout? I mean, given the kind of things you're talking about right now in terms of this pouring into these young people and having them pour into you, them and their families.
So, yeah, burnout is definitely a part of this if you're going to move in this type of way. Could I have done things better? Yes.
Like always, right?
And so what I would say is definitely build community and build some parameters. I don't think I did that well. I'm doing a much better job at that now. So I've learned from, trial and error, in my early days, I guess the first 19 years, I was just running really hard and made sure everyone had access to me 24 hours. And it ran me down. Mm-hmm. And but I've learned in the last 3 years that I can still be an effective teacher. They can still have access to me. And I can make time for myself. And cut off the phone after, 7 o'clock. Make time for my hobbies, make time for me on the weekends. Whereas before I would feel guilty about that for some reason. So no, you have to have your me time and it's okay. And my students have done okay without me being like, oh, no, I have to call back right now. I have to do this right now. I don't know what that was all about, but it's okay. You can still be an effective teacher without responding all of the time.
That's really important. I mean, I know, you spent time as an elected official here in DC as an area neighborhood commissioner. And I wonder if either of you, since both of you have worked in private schools, charter schools, public schools, African-centered schools, worked at the university level, Kim, you advising students on what and how to register for classes, and Kathy, of course, you and your various formations on faculties at several HBCUs. How important in terms of policy? What are some of the things that administrators in the schools can do? What should cities and governments be thinking about in terms of trying to recruit to the profession the best kind of teachers? What role would either you have to? What would you have to say about policymakers? Well, how can policymakers help in the area of education? Because generally, when we read about them, we're reading about budget cuts. We're reading about them getting involved in what students should learn. But in terms of what you're talking about, where the rubber meets the road in the classroom, what can policymakers do to enhance the experience and really create the best type of learning environments for our people?
I would say, obviously, invest more money around so that schools can hire social workers and community. So, I'm against having police in the schools. Mm-hmm. Instead of having police in schools, have people who are trained to interrupt and work with students with the various traumas that come with living in poverty. And poverty is not just in inner cities, it's all over this country. And people are bringing all of these traumas to school, and children are dealing with them, and the teachers. And that was something that I was internalizing. And I didn't even know it. I was down to 99 pounds and thought,
what?
Yeah, I thought I was normal. I had no idea until I went to this new school and started. I was like, wait a minute. Okay. But stress is something else.
Wow.
And if the children, and that was happening to me, and I was, getting paid every day, every 2 weeks. And I had a job and a home. Imagine what that stress is doing to the children.
My God.
And the police officer is not helping.
Yes.
We need people in there who are trained to help these, and not just one person. We need a lot of people.
Yes. Well, Kat, it's interesting. You've taught in Philadelphia. You have worked in a variety of environments. Would you say that some of those things that Kim is saying resonate with you as well in terms of, really having policymakers try to create places and structures so folks can intervene? What are some of the best policymakers that you've worked with, best administrators and others had to do?
I would say the social workers, 200%. We need more of that in our schools. I think that we need more of an exchange. And I'm thinking about, how my grandmother actually was one of those community people that came into schools to just be a community member in that school, because I think that there is a way in which we have to kind of spread the investment so that it is not just parents and their students, but the community investment in those students. And I want to also put out a plug for, I think when I was at the University of the Virgin Islands, one of the things that I thought should happen everywhere was this, just free wellness program for if you were a government employee, and that included the faculty at the University of the Virgin Islands, then this was a free wellness program. And it was just amazing what, kickboxing on Monday and Friday and some Pilates and some Soca Zumba on Wednesday would actually do for me to allow me to be, restored and renewed, and to be able to go back into that classroom and do the work that needed to be done. So I think that we have to find ways to, invest in those young people and to invest in teachers and educators and staff in ways that are not just, a response to COVID or, let's do this for this, part of the academic year and then it falls away. But how do we help people bring their best selves to the classroom? And I think that includes both young people and those teachers and the staff that are there working with them.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, that's actually a beautiful bridge to build to our last section where we'll talk about, and hopefully you all will give some recommendations to students, to teachers, to community on how they can prepare our young people for the coming school year and support our educators and support our teachers in the process of teaching the next generation. So we'll be back in a moment here at the Black Table with Kathy Adams and Kim Worthy at our Master Teachers Roundtable. Back in a moment.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Can you believe the nerve of these Republicans? They only want to block progress for our community. They talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. They played politics with veterans' health care. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and funding for our HBCUs, and against lowering prescription drug costs for our seniors. These Republicans keep trying hard to stand in the way, but President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats won't let them. They are delivering for us. The Democratic National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back to the Black Table. We've been spending this hour with our HBCU Master Teacher Educator Roundtable, a regular, Kathy Adams, and one of our now regulars, Kim Worthy, both of them HBCU graduates and master teachers in their own right. When we left, we were talking about this work, this sustaining the self that serves, so to speak, for teachers. Well, we're facing, of course, the third year and now an endemic phase of the pandemic. Hopefully, we don't have a breakout resurgence. Any thoughts either of you have on what students should be prepared to do and preparing themselves to do for the coming school year, what parents should be preparing themselves to do for this coming school year, and what the community should be preparing to do to help in the process? And we can start with you.
Preparing for the school year.
And I said in the context of you've seen everything from the most well-resourced students to the students who have basically themselves. So I think about what you told us when you were in South Africa teaching in the townships. And they didn't have a lot, but that culture really sustained them. So I don't know what if you're talking to a child, what should they be preparing themselves to do coming in this school year?
I would say, That's a hard one. Because, this DC,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at DC. Be safe.
Wow. How about that? That was so obvious, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot going on in DC.
Yes. The world. Thinking about the you're right. Be safe, huh? They can't even assume safety. Have metal detectors ever made either of you feel safer in a school? Do you want a gun as a teacher?
Absolutely not.
No, I know you organized against that, Ms. Worthy. So, but when we think safety, all the headlines are about people coming into school, assuming that the school has been secured from physical violence from outside. Are there things that should be put in place how should students be thinking even in terms of how they enter a learning space? You've already given us a lot just through your own experiences, but if you're a young person, you're a 16-year-old or a 6-year-old for that matter. When you come into school, what should you be thinking about in the fall?
I think it's really helpful for both young people and educators to have some affirmations, right? Something that you say every day, that you ritualize those affirmations for who you want to be and how you want to walk, because sometimes just that intentionality can make the difference before you find yourself in a difficult situation, and so I would say affirmations are really important for parents that have college age students. It's probably not popular to say, but I would encourage them, to get FERPA waivers so that we can have a conversation with them as parents about what is going on with their students.
Yeah, you touched the third rail right there, because both of y'all know, and Ms. Worthy, you were a counselor at college. Help people. What is FERPA? Because somebody out there may not know, because they breaking the FERPA rule every single day.
Every day.
Black parents don't believe in the FERPA. They don't even know what that is. But help people who might not know what we're talking about.
FERPA is a law.
Not in the Black community. No, I'm just playing.
Is the law that states that basically when I was about to say a child.
You got a college age daughter right now. Shout out to Nati and sophomore.
I know. Look, you are my child. But when a student enters college at 18, they are an adult considered by the government. And therefore, the parents do not have the right to access their grades, basically their grades, access their files on campus. And I was like, sign the waiver right now.
Unless they sign a waiver, at which point
they sign a waiver.
And I just want to add, I've done this for years. I adhere to FERPA, but parents need information. And so there's always a way, if there's not a waiver, to say to that student, in a 3-way conversation, let's pull up your record, let's have a conversation about this, and let's build a plan moving forward, right? And so there are ways to do that. But I think that that parents should know that there is a waiver that will that they can sign. And then we can have a deeper conversation about what I see, and work with their student towards success. And I think that I'm saying that because communication is really important, right? And so you're building community, and you want to have open lines of communication with that student, but sometimes students get stuck. Sometimes there is this way in which, they think that maybe the problem that they have is not severe enough. And so then they wait until there's this compounding of issues, right? And so to open up the lines of communication, I think, it's just critical. And so I often tell my students, let's have those open lines with no judgment, like no judgment, because I want to know, okay, what do we need to do to get the work in? And then also, how do we connect you to some resources that are warranted for whatever that situation is? But I often tell them, like, sometimes life gets in the way. That happens for everybody, and it's the open communication that is going to help, and that they should feel comfortable to disclose as much or as little, but that if they just say to me, Dr. Adams, some things came up. Can I get 2 more days? Some things came up. Can I get that assignment to you this weekend? I want your best work, not the work that you stayed up all night in the midst of some trauma or anxiety and, just to get it in. It's like, how do we get you to that place where you can be proud of what you turned in? And that happens with open communication. And so that's why I mentioned the FERPA waiver, because that also is another line of communication. And I think maybe because of my experience with, with middle school students and high school students, I welcome those conversations. I hear people saying, oh, I had a parent call me. And I'm like, why on the face of that is that, something for concern? I actually, I was really encouraged as students were on Zoom during this pandemic that they're like, oh, well, my mom is listening in the background. And, I would just beam around that. Like, yes, like mom is reading the book that we're reading. And so I think that's just an extension of that exchange between community, and not a narrow exchange between teacher and student or parent and student. How do we widen out those conversations, offensively and maybe as interventions when they're needed?
Absolutely. Oh man, Ms. Worthy, we got about a minute left. I don't know if you've got a final message you want to give to the community and to the listeners as to how we can surround our teachers and students in the process.
Yeah, I would just say support your children with lots of love this year. Be gentle, be graceful. We're still in a pandemic. There's still residue from everything that has come out of this pandemic, a lot of mental health concerns, and be aware of all of that. Be aware. And so show a lot of love and gentleness to our children, and kindness to the teachers. We are still going through it as well. And but everybody, I just say, eat well, drink lots of water, and just heavy on the vitamin D and folate and vitamin B12. Get it all up in you, because we are still in a pandemic and it's just kicking our behinds.
Sage advice. This has been a joy. I expect that there are going to be a lot of people who play this several times. If you are in what we have to call professional development, but really communities of fellow craft trying to struggle to be better teachers, put this on loop. Maybe consider playing this hour and having conversation around it, because this is more than the back to school conversation we've had. This has basically been a master class on what it means to be a teacher with students in a learning environment. So I want to thank you all. Until next time, I'm sure we'll probably do this again shortly in another variation and continue this conversation. But thank you both for taking time out of your schedule as teachers. We know it's that time of year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. With great pleasure. We'll be back in a moment here at the Black Table to clear the table and prepare for our next session. Back in a moment.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
hatred on the streets. A horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back to the Black Table here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Greg Carr. And remember to support the Black Star Network. You can always do that when you go on to the Black Star Network app, when you go to the website, whatever and however you're viewing us in this over-the-top streaming platform. Make sure that you support us because you're not going to see these conversations anywhere else. We want to thank again Ms. Kimberly Worthy of the Butler School and a master teacher who's taught in so many different variations, and Professor Catherine Adams from Claflin University, who also has taught in so many different types of educational formats and variations, for joining our HBCU Master Teacher Roundtable today. And we'll end with some thoughts from a good friend and colleague and a Jegna of Kathy, of Kim, and of myself, and so many of us, the great Asa Hilliard III. Asa Hilliard III, a master teacher in his own right, who wrote a chapter in a book called Young, Gifted, and Black entitled No Mystery. He said there's no mystery to teaching children of African descent. They are not damaged. They are not deviant. They are not marginal. They are human beings of African descent. And he stressed the importance of culture. And he said that all teachers of all children should have content mastery and the ability to help those students acquire masteries of their own. And that's built on trust, as we heard a moment ago. That's built on community and relationships. That's built on communication. That's built on having elder teachers and Jegnas to help you, to help show you what to do, to get out of your way when you've got it, and to intervene for you when sometimes policymakers make missteps. And I'll end with Ms. Worthy's words. Let's have some love for each other, some compassion, some kindness. Let's take care of ourselves. And as Kathy Adams reminded us, let us take care of each other. So we'll be back at the Black Table next week here on the Black Star Network. Everybody stay safe, look out for each other, and we'll see you soon.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is rolling@RolandSMartin.com.